I will not fly with you. You're just a diversity hire. You're fired. Get out! I refuse to risk an $80 million aircraft on someone who clearly doesn't belong here.
Do you know who owns this plane?
His voice cut through the air like ice, dripping with false authority. I refuse to risk an $80 million aircraft on someone who clearly doesn't belong here. Captain Robert Mitchell, a seasoned veteran with silver hair and an ego to match, stared at his new co-pilot, Diana Carter, with pure contempt. He didn't see her qualifications or her experience. He saw only her skin color. He saw what he believed was a checkbox, not a real pilot. Inside the pristine cockpit of a brand new Gulfstream jet, he drew his line in the sand. He flat out refused to take off. But just as he grabbed his phone to call operations and demand her immediate removal, the captain's face went white, because Diana had just made a phone call of her own. "Richard," she said, her voice cold as steel. "This is Diana Carter. Yes, that Diana Carter. Tell me something, Captain. Do you have any idea who actually owns this aircraft? Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more." The briefing room at Millbrook Executive Airport wasn't your typical terminal. Millbrook, located in northern Connecticut, catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. This was where billionaires treated private jets like rental cars, where the scent of expensive aviation fuel hung permanently in the air. Inside the operations center of Phoenix Elite Aviation, Captain Robert Mitchell drummed a gold pen against his flight log. Robert saw himself as the absolute pinnacle of aviation. At 60 years old, with a rigid jawline and silver hair styled to perfection, he carried himself like royalty. Former military, he'd flown combat jets for 15 years before moving to commercial airlines, then finally settling into the luxury of private aviation. He genuinely believed he was untouchable, a pilot trusted with the lives of the world's most powerful people, and more critically, with their $80 million flying machines. Today's assignment had him on edge. He was scheduled to fly the company's newest prize, a spectacular Gulfstream G800, on a critical coast-to-coast journey to San Francisco. The passenger was none other than Marcus Blackwood, a software billionaire whose upcoming $320 million contract could single-handedly determine Phoenix Elite's future. Robert despised last-minute changes to his carefully structured routine, and today brought the worst kind of change. His regular first officer, a dependable man named Stephen, was unexpectedly out on emergency leave. Robert hated uncertainty. He hated anything new. The door to the briefing room slid open with a soft hiss. Robert kept his eyes glued to the flight documents, assuming it was just a ground crew member. "Coffee, strongest you've got," he muttered without looking up. "I'll take sparkling water, actually, and the updated weather charts if they're available. The digital system seems to be running slow today." The voice was distinctly female, clear and confident. Robert's head jerked up instantly. Standing in the doorway was a young black woman wearing an impeccably pressed Phoenix Elite pilot uniform. She was securing her hair into a professional bun, her expensive leather flight bag positioned neatly beside her feet. Robert's eyes slowly scanned her from head to toe, his expression radiating dismissal. He registered a woman somewhere in her early 30s. He saw her dark complexion. He saw what he assumed was tokenism. He absolutely did not see a qualified pilot. He released a sharp, mocking laugh. "You must be Sarah, the new cabin attendant. Staff briefing doesn't start for another 30 minutes. You should wait in the passenger lounge." The woman showed no signs of embarrassment or anger. She simply locked eyes with him, her gaze steady and intelligent. "I'm not Sarah, Captain. I'm your first officer, Diana Carter." She extended her hand professionally. Robert stared at her outstretched hand as if it were diseased, then grudgingly shook it. Her handshake was surprisingly firm, which irritated him further. "Carter," he repeated slowly, drawing out each syllable. "Right, the substitution. Nobody informed me about this." "It was a last-second roster adjustment, Captain. I've already gone through the complete dispatch release and reviewed the aircraft's full maintenance history. She just completed her 200-hour inspection yesterday." "Everything checked out perfectly," Diana explained, moving smoothly to the computer station. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, pulling up current weather patterns, satellite radar imagery, and detailed performance calculations. Robert watched her with mounting frustration. He was accustomed to first officers who were hesitant and deferential, who waited for his approval before making any moves. This woman acted like she had every right to be there. "What's your total flight time on the G800, Carter?" he demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. 430 hours in this specific type, Captain. 7,200 hours total time. Airline transport pilot certified with type ratings in the Gulfstream family and the Bombardier Global Series. She answered casually, not even glancing away from the screen. 7,000 hours. Robert felt momentarily thrown off balance. That was substantial for someone who appeared so young. He'd automatically assumed she was a barely qualified pilot pushed through by some corporate diversity initiative. He quickly regrouped his skepticism. She had to be exaggerating, or most of those hours were probably just glorified computer simulation. "Very impressive numbers," he said, sarcasm thick in his voice. "I'm certain all that virtual reality time really prepared you for actual flying. I have over 22,000 hours, First Officer. I flew genuine combat missions before you were probably born. On my flight deck, we operate by my standards, strictly by regulation, but ultimately my way. No cutting corners, no relying on these modern tablet gadgets. You keep your attention outside the cockpit and stay silent unless I specifically request input. Understood." Diana finally turned from the monitor, her face revealing nothing. She held up her electronic flight bag containing all their navigation charts. "The tablet gadgets, as you described them, are now mandatory standard operating procedure company-wide, Captain, and I'm extremely familiar with regulations. I believe in following them precisely. Should we review our flight plan together? I've identified a potential weather issue over the Rocky Mountains. There's a significant turbulence advisory. We might want to request a higher cruising altitude immediately rather than dealing with it mid-flight." She was absolutely correct. He'd noticed the turbulence warning but had brushed it aside, confident he could handle whatever came. This young woman wasn't just challenging his authority, she was demonstrating genuine competence. To Robert Mitchell, that was the most infuriating quality imaginable. "I determine our altitude, Carter," he snapped harshly. "I am the pilot in command of this aircraft. Your responsibility is running checklists and supporting my decisions, nothing more. Now let's proceed to inspect my plane, and try your best to keep pace." He grabbed his captain's hat and marched out of the room, not bothering to check if she was following. He was already mentally drafting a complaint to management. This situation was completely unacceptable. He was Captain Robert Mitchell. He absolutely would not fly alongside what he considered an affirmative action placement. The passenger list didn't matter. The true valuable cargo on this flight was his own reputation. The Gulfstream G800, registration number November 800 Phoenix, sat gleaming on the tarmac like a work of aerospace art. This was the absolute peak of private aviation luxury. An $80 million combination of cutting-edge engineering and opulent comfort. Its pearl white and deep navy paint schemes sparkled brilliantly in the late morning sunlight. Robert felt genuine pride swelling in his chest. This was his domain. This was where he reigned supreme. He began his standard pre-flight exterior inspection, fully expecting Diana to follow behind him dutifully like an apprentice. Instead, she moved independently to the opposite side of the aircraft, conducting her own thorough inspection with practiced efficiency and precision. Robert was meticulous in his routine, but it was the meticulousness of long-established habit. He checked tire pressure, examined the fuselage for any damage, and verified the pitot tubes were clear. He was making his way along the fuselage when he heard Diana's voice calling from beneath the right wing. "Captain, I need you to look at something here." Robert sighed dramatically and walked over slowly. "What is it now, Carter? Found a tiny scratch in the paintwork." Diana was crouched low, directing a compact flashlight at the wing-to-body connection point near the main landing gear assembly. "It's not a scratch, Captain. It's fluid seepage. Appears to be hydraulic fluid." Robert bent down reluctantly. He could see an extremely small greenish residue, barely larger than a coin. He scoffed dismissively and wiped it with his finger. "That's just residual. The maintenance team was working in this area recently. They obviously spilled a single drop. It's well within acceptable parameters." Diana remained in position, not moving. It appears fresh, Captain, and it's originating from the panel seam, not from the access hatch. Could indicate a seal failure on the backup hydraulic pump. The G800 technical manual is very explicit about any undocumented hydraulic seepage. Robert's expression hardened. He absolutely detested being questioned. He despised being corrected, and he especially loathed being corrected by her about his aircraft. "First officer," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "I have operated aircraft with multiple systems completely disabled. I understand the distinction between a drip and actual seepage. This is absolutely nothing. We are not documenting this aircraft and causing delays for Mr. Blackwood over a meaningless spot of fluid." Diana stood up slowly, maintaining her completely professional demeanor. "With all due respect, Captain, company regulations require we document it. It takes 3 minutes to enter it in the electronic logbook. Maintenance can quickly verify it's within tolerance and will have proper documentation. If we ignore it and that spot becomes a real leak over Arizona, our pilot certificates are at risk. And I'm not willing to jeopardize mine." She pulled out her electronic device, tapped the screen decisively, and began officially logging the discrepancy, taking a high-resolution photograph of the seepage with the tablet's camera. Robert's anger surged. She had, in the most professionally correct way possible, completely overridden his command authority. The entry was now officially recorded. Maintenance would be required to formally sign off before departure. It was a direct challenge to his position as captain in command. "You've just added 45 minutes to our departure time, Carter," he said through clenched teeth. 45 minutes of Mr. Blackwood's extremely valuable time. I hope you feel satisfied with your little cover-yourself maneuver." "I feel satisfied doing my job correctly, Captain," she responded, finishing the electronic entry. "Safety protocols aren't political maneuvers. I'll contact maintenance to get a supervisor's signature. You can continue your inspection." She walked away calmly, already on her phone, her tone polite but absolutely firm. Robert stood there staring at the hydraulic fluid residue, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. She would definitely pay for this insubordination. This wasn't merely incompetence anymore. This was direct defiance of his authority. By the time they settled into the cockpit, Robert's mood was absolutely black. The passengers had boarded. Marcus Blackwood, a man who radiated intense nervous energy, accompanied by 3 serious-looking attorneys. Robert had put on his most ingratiating performance. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Blackwood. We'll have you in San Francisco well ahead of schedule." Blackwood had merely nodded briefly, already absorbed in his laptop screen. Now seated in the left captain's seat of the G800's incredibly advanced cockpit, Robert began his standard pre-flight procedures. The flight deck was a technological masterpiece, featuring rich black leather and countless glowing digital displays. Diana, occupying the right first officer seat, began the formal before engine start checklist, her voice maintaining a calm, measured tone. "Avionics master switch on. Inertial navigation systems initializing." Robert only grunted in acknowledgement. The maintenance supervisor had predictably signed off on the seepage, officially documenting it as within acceptable limits per the technical manual. But he'd also specifically thanked Diana. "Excellent observation, First Officer Carter," the man had said genuinely. "This is a brand new airframe. We're monitoring these systems extremely closely. Most pilots would have completely missed something that minor." This comment naturally only intensified Robert's simmering rage. Most pilots. He interpreted that as a deliberate insult directed at him. They were nearly finished with the extensive checklist. The passenger cabin was secured. The flight attendant, Emily, a young woman who seemed genuinely terrified of Robert, had confirmed all passengers were properly seated. Air traffic clearance obtained and loaded. "Complete flight plan verified and programmed," Diana stated, her eyes methodically scanning all the instrument displays. "Before engine start checklist is fully complete, Captain." Robert sat motionless for a full 15 seconds, not responding. He stared straight ahead through the windscreen at the executive terminal building. He could see the operations director, a man named Richard, escorting another wealthy client toward a smaller aircraft. "We're not departing," Robert announced flatly. Diana's head turned sharply toward him. "Excuse me, Captain. I stated we are not departing," Robert repeated, his voice cold and flat. He slowly, very deliberately began unfastening his complex 5-point safety harness. Is there a mechanical issue with the aircraft? Diana asked, her mind immediately analyzing potential technical problems. Did maintenance contact us again? Is it related to the hydraulic seepage? The issue, Robert said, turning to face her directly, is you. The quiet of the G800 cockpit, normally a sanctuary of calm professionalism, suddenly felt electrically charged and suffocating. Diana's hand, which had been positioned to advance the engine throttle controls, froze completely in place. "I beg your pardon, Captain?" she asked, maintaining her professional composure, though she felt ice forming in her stomach. She had dealt with arrogant captains before, dismissive captains, insecure captains. But this felt different. This felt dangerous. "There's no begging necessary." Robert sneered, throwing his harness straps aside completely. "I've been examining your credentials. Everything seems suspiciously convenient. 7,000 hours. A G800 type rating practically handed to you. It reeks, Carter. It absolutely reeks of human resources quotas and corporate diversity programs." "Captain Mitchell," Diana said, keeping her voice absolutely level. "My qualifications are fully compliant with Federal Aviation Administration standards and company requirements. They are not subject to debate. We have an extremely important passenger on board and a scheduled departure in 6 minutes. We need to start these engines immediately." "We need to do absolutely nothing," Robert shot back, his face reddening noticeably. He leaned aggressively across the center console, his voice becoming a low, furious whisper. "I am the pilot in command of this aircraft. That means I am personally responsible for this $80 million machine and every single life aboard. And I am telling you directly, I am absolutely not comfortable flying with you. Your attitude has been insubordinate. Your documentation of that leak was a childish, backstabbing political move. I have a gut instinct. And my gut instinct, which has kept me alive through 22,000 flight hours, tells me you are a genuine risk. You are a liability. I will not fly this aircraft with you." The accusation hung heavily in the air, more oppressive than any weather turbulence. He wasn't merely questioning her professional competence. He was weaponizing the sacred principles of aviation safety, an instinct to disguise his obvious personal prejudice. "A risk, Captain?" Diana asked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you prepared to specifically articulate exactly which aviation regulation or safety procedure I have violated?" "My attitude has been to follow standard operating procedures precisely. Procedures you were prepared to ignore." "Don't you dare twist my words around," Robert practically roared, finally losing all composure completely. He jabbed his finger aggressively toward her. "I know exactly your type. You arrive here checking diversity boxes and filling quotas, thinking you understand everything. You're dangerous and I'm officially grounding this entire flight." He reached for his phone decisively. "I'm calling Richard in operations immediately. I'm informing him I'm refusing this flight assignment until they locate a genuinely qualified first officer. Someone I can actually trust, not some diversity placement hire." The words, spoken with such pure venom, were specifically designed to destroy her, to make her cry or lose her temper or simply quit. Diana Carter did absolutely none of those things. She simply observed him carefully, her expression hardening from professional calm to something cold and deeply analytical. She recognized a man in complete panic mode, a man so terrified of her obvious competence that he was willing to commit professional suicide. "You're making a catastrophic mistake, Captain Mitchell," she said quietly, her voice like winter. "The only mistake happening here was allowing you onto this flight deck," he snarled, pressing his phone to his ear. "Richard, yes, it's Robert up here on the G800. Listen carefully, we have a serious problem. No, not with the aircraft. It's the new first officer, Carter. She's clearly not meeting standards. No, I'm not comfortable whatsoever. She's been insubordinate. Her experience seems questionable at best. I don't care about procedures. I am officially refusing to fly with her in the right seat. Find me a replacement immediately. Get Stephen back somehow. Find me anyone qualified, or Mr. Blackwood stays on the ground indefinitely." He listened briefly, his expression becoming smug and satisfied. "Excellent, I'll wait right here." He disconnected the call and tossed his phone carelessly onto the instrument panel. He leaned back confidently, crossing his arms across his chest. "There, That's how real authority works. Operations is locating a proper replacement as we speak. You can go wait in the passenger lounge. You're officially grounded, Carter. Collect your belongings. From the passenger cabin, a curtain was pulled back slightly. The young flight attendant, Emily, looked in nervously, her face extremely pale. Captain, Mr. Blackwood is asking about the departure delay. He's conducting a very important conference call. Tell Mr. Blackwood we're experiencing a minor crew scheduling issue and close that curtain immediately, Robert bellowed harshly. Emily physically flinched and disappeared instantly. Robert looked back at Diana, fully expecting to see her defeated and humiliated. But she hadn't moved at all. She hadn't unbuckled her harness. She was simply watching him with an unreadable expression. "What's wrong with you? Are you deaf? I clearly stated get out," he said harshly. Diana slowly, very calmly reached into her professional flight bag. She didn't pull out any manuals or her credential documents. She pulled out her personal cell phone. "You called Richard the director of flight operations," she stated, her voice becoming conversational. "Absolutely right, I did," Robert scoffed dismissively. "He understands my professional standards completely." "Yes, he certainly does," Diana agreed calmly. She dialed a number deliberately. "But when I encounter a human resources issue this significantly serious, I find it's far better to contact Richard's direct superior." Robert's smug expression faltered noticeably. "What are you talking about? Richard's supervisor is the chief operating officer." "No," Diana said as her call connected. "His supervisor is me." She activated the phone's speaker function. "Hello, Richard, it's Diana. I'm currently on the G800, registration November 800 Phoenix. Yes, the Millbrook to San Francisco leg." Robert's blood turned to absolute ice. "Richard, I'm sitting here with Captain Robert Mitchell," Diana continued, her eyes locked directly on his face. "He just contacted you, correct? Refusing the flight assignment? What specifically was his stated reason?" Richard's voice, small and panicked, came through the speaker clearly. "Miss Carter, I had absolutely no idea you were. He said he claimed you were an unqualified risk. I was attempting to locate Captain Rodriguez to resolve the situation." "An unqualified risk. I understand completely," Diana said. "Thank you, Richard. Please remain on this call. I'm officially grounding Captain Mitchell effective immediately. I want security personnel to meet him at the executive terminal, and I want you to pull his complete training file and entire flight history. Specifically, I want to verify if he's completed the mandatory technical bulletin on the G800's backup hydraulic system, the one distributed last Wednesday." "Immediately, Miss Carter, right away." Diana disconnected and looked directly at Robert. Robert Mitchell was no longer red-faced with anger. He was a ghostly, sickly shade of pale. The blood had completely drained from his face, leaving his skin looking like old paper. "Miss Carter," he stammered weakly. At that precise moment, the cockpit door opened again. This time, it wasn't Emily. It was the extremely important passenger himself, Marcus Blackwood. His face showed pure fury. "What in the hell is happening here?" Blackwood demanded angrily. "I'm about to lose a $12 billion acquisition because you two are playing some kind of..." He stopped abruptly. He stared directly at Diana. His angry expression melted instantly into one of pure shocked recognition. "Diana," Blackwood said, his voice cracking slightly. "Diana Carter, is that actually you? The Diana Carter?" Robert's head swiveled frantically between the billionaire and his copilot, his mind completely unable to process what was happening. Diana finally unbuckled her safety harness deliberately. She stood up, suddenly becoming a commanding presence in the confined cockpit space. "Hello, Marcus. My sincere apologies for the delay. We're simply addressing an internal personnel matter." She turned to Robert, her voice dropping all pretense of being a subordinate first officer. It was now unmistakably the voice of a chief executive officer, the voice of a woman who personally signs $80 million aircraft purchases. "Captain Mitchell," she said, her words precise and cutting. "You instructed me to keep silent. You labeled me a diversity hire. You refused to fly with me." She pointed directly to the aircraft registration number visible on the certification plate mounted on the bulkhead. "Do you understand what Phoenix stands for in that tail number, Captain?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Robert just shook his head helplessly, his mouth opening and closing silently. "My complete legal name," she stated clearly, "is Diana Phoenix Carter. Phoenix doesn't just represent the company. I didn't simply join Phoenix Elite Aviation." I founded it from absolutely nothing. This $80 million aircraft you were so concerned about protecting, it's my personal aircraft. You weren't refusing to fly with an ordinary co-pilot. You were refusing to fly with your chief executive officer. The silence that followed Diana's revelation was more profound than the soundproofed cockpit walls. It was an absolute vacuum, completely draining all the air and arrogance from Robert Mitchell. The man who moments before had been a self-proclaimed king was now just a pale, trembling man in an expensive uniform. "Chief Executive Officer," he whispered, the words barely audible. "But you're black." The words escaped before he could stop them, the final pathetic expression of his deep-seated bigotry. Marcus Blackwood, the billionaire, made a sound of absolute disgust. "Have you completely lost your mind? This is Diana Carter. She invented the revolutionary fractional ownership management software that NetJets and FlexJet both desperately tried to purchase. She built Phoenix Elite from absolutely nothing with 4 used Learjets. She's forgotten more about aviation than you'll ever possibly know." Diana held up one hand, silencing Marcus. Her focus remained absolutely laser-sharp on the man in the captain's seat. "Yes, Captain, I am the chief executive officer, and yes, I am a black woman. These two facts are not mutually exclusive whatsoever," she said, her voice like frozen water. "I fly regular line operations incognito every quarter. I fly as first officer to evaluate my flight crews, to ensure absolute professionalism, to monitor our safety culture, to observe what my captains are genuinely like when they believe nobody from corporate management is observing." She leaned closer to him. "And you, Captain Mitchell, have provided me with the most thorough and absolutely appalling culture assessment to date. You didn't simply fail this evaluation. You have conclusively proven you are a liability to my brand reputation, my clients, and my safety record." I didn't know," Robert stammered desperately, his mind racing frantically to find any escape route. "It was a complete misunderstanding, a mistake. I was actually testing you. Yes, a captain's initiative assessment to determine if you possess the right qualities. You passed. You passed brilliantly. First officer, I mean, Miss Carter." It was such a pathetic, transparent lie that Diana almost laughed out loud. "A test," she repeated coldly. "Was calling me a diversity hire part of your test. Was refusing to fly your final examination question. You weren't testing me whatsoever. You were indulging your personal prejudices, and in doing so, you have cost this company enormously." She gestured toward Marcus Blackwood. "Mr. Blackwood here was prepared to sign a 7-year, $320 million exclusive contract with Phoenix Elite, a complete contract for his entire executive team's aviation needs. But I imagine after witnessing my senior captain's behavior firsthand, he's reconsidering that decision significantly." Marcus Blackwood crossed his arms firmly. "You're absolutely right, I am, Diana. If this represents the caliber of dinosaur you have on your flight decks, I cannot trust you with my people. This deal is completely off." Robert's entire world imploded instantly. He saw everything flash before his eyes in rapid succession. The $320 million contract, his prestigious job, his industry reputation, his 22,000 hours of accumulated pride, all vanishing. "No," he pleaded, a desperate whining sound that was horrifying to hear from the once proud captain. "Please, Miss Carter, Diana, I have a family depending on me. I sincerely apologize. I deeply, profoundly apologize." It was a catastrophic lapse in judgment. "It will absolutely never happen again. Please don't do this to me." "You're correct about one thing," Diana said, her voice completely devoid of any pity. "It will absolutely never happen again. You are officially grounded, effective immediately. Take your flight bag, surrender your company credentials to me, and exit my aircraft." "Please," he whispered brokenly. "Now, Captain," Diana commanded firmly. 2 large, uniformed airport security officers appeared at the cockpit entrance. They had clearly been summoned by Richard and had been waiting for the signal. "Captain Mitchell," one officer said, his voice polite but absolutely firm, "we've been instructed to escort you from the premises immediately." Robert's entire body collapsed inward. The fight was completely gone. He was a hollow shell. He fumbled clumsily with his identification badge, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unclip it from his uniform shoulder board. He handed it to Diana with trembling fingers. Their hands brushed briefly. His skin felt clammy and cold. "Diana," he tried one final time, his voice breaking completely. "Leave," she stated flatly. As the security officers took his arms firmly, Robert Mitchell, the 22,000-hour veteran, the former military combat pilot, the self-proclaimed King of Millbrook, was unceremoniously escorted from the cockpit. He was walked down the aircraft stairs, past the gleaming G-800, and across the entire ramp in full view of ground crews and other flight crews. It was a walk of pure, absolute humiliation. The gossip network of the aviation ramp would have his career destroyed and distributed before he even reached the parking lot. In the cockpit, silence reigned once again. Marcus Blackwood finally released a long, heavy breath. "Well," he said carefully, "that was certainly something remarkable." Diana slid smoothly into the left-hand captain's seat. The leather felt cool and perfectly familiar. She strapped herself in efficiently, her movements fluid and completely practiced. "Marcus, my sincere apologies for the disruption. We're absolutely still flying to San Francisco," she said confidently, her fingers already moving across the control panel with precision. "Emily," she called to the flight attendant who was carefully peering in, her eyes wide with shock. "Please contact operations immediately. Tell Richard to send Captain Rodriguez to the aircraft. He's currently on standby status. He'll serve as my first officer. We'll be departing in 18 minutes. "Yes, ma'am." "Right away, Miss Carter," Emily responded quickly, newfound respect evident in her voice. Marcus Blackwood watched Diana carefully as she began programming the sophisticated flight computer system. "You're actually going to fly the plane yourself?" Diana looked up, a small, somewhat weary smile on her face. "Of course, Marcus. I'm a pilot. It's what I genuinely do. And unlike Captain Mitchell, I've actually studied the recent maintenance technical bulletins thoroughly." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow, genuine grin spread across his face. "You know something, Diana? That contract is back on the table, but I have one specific condition." "What's that?" "Triple it. 320 million becomes 960 million, and I want a key person clause specifically nomming you. If you're not actively running this company, the entire deal becomes void. I only invest in genuine excellence." Diana nodded once. "I can absolutely agree to those terms, Marcus. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to pilot professionally." As Marcus returned to the passenger cabin, Diana took a deep, steadying breath. The first fire was extinguished, but now came the harder karma. Captain Mitchell's termination was merely the beginning. His true downfall was still yet to come. The humiliation of the walk across the aviation ramp was a searing brand on Robert Mitchell's soul. Every single face he passed, baggage handlers, refueling truck operators, fellow pilots from competing companies waiting for their own wealthy clients, seemed to be laughing at his disgrace. The security officers remained professionally silent, which somehow made everything worse. They guided him not to the main executive terminal lounge, but to a small, windowless administrative office in the building's rear section. Waiting for him was Richard, the director of flight operations. Richard was a man Robert had consistently bullied and disrespected, a ground administrator he'd treated with the same contempt he'd shown Diana. Today, Richard's face was absolutely stone cold. "Robert," Richard said, not standing up or offering any greeting. He slid a single-page document across the desk's surface. "This is your official termination notice. Your severance package is completely voided due to gross misconduct and direct violation of the company's absolute zero-tolerance anti-discrimination policy. You'll be compensated for the hours you've worked this week only. Your health insurance coverage expires at midnight tonight." "Gross misconduct," Robert sputtered, his voice cracking with desperation. "She deliberately set me up. She entrapped me. That's illegal entrapment. I'll sue. I'll sue her personally. I'll sue the entire company. I'll file complaints with the Federal Aviation Administration." Richard leaned back in his chair slowly and pressed his fingertips together thoughtfully. The expression on his face showed profound, weary disgust. "You want to involve the FAA, Robert? Let's discuss that option thoroughly, because Miss Carter was absolutely correct. I did pull your complete training records as instructed." He rotated his laptop computer around to face Robert. On the screen was a comprehensive list of company-issued technical bulletins. "This one," Richard said, pointing to a specific entry, is Mandatory Bulletin G800 Technical Memorandum 4534. It was officially issued last Wednesday at 1000 hours. It was electronically distributed to all flight crews and flagged as absolutely required reading in our training management system. It specifically addresses the backup hydraulic pump seal tolerances on the new G800 aircraft fleet. Robert stared at the screen blankly. He hadn't read it. He received dozens of those bulletins weekly. He routinely deleted them. He figured he'd learn whatever was important during simulator training eventually. Richard continued, his voice becoming ice-cold. The bulletin states, and I'm quoting directly, any newly discovered seepage of hydraulic fluid, regardless of apparent severity, from the right side backup hydraulic pump housing must be treated as a mandatory no-go condition pending complete inspection. The bulletin was issued because a G800 operating in Singapore experienced a catastrophic pump failure at 42,000 feet after a similar minor seepage was initially noted and dismissed. Robert's blood, which had been pale with humiliation, now ran freezing cold with a completely different, more primal fear. But maintenance officially signed it off, Robert protested weakly. They explicitly stated it was within tolerance. Yes, they did initially, Richard agreed coldly. Because you, as pilot in command, told them authoritatively it was residual spillage. You established the narrative. You informed them it was a maintenance spill, not actual seepage. They trusted you. They trusted your 22,000 hours of experience. He leaned forward intensely. But First Officer Carter, your supposedly unqualified copilot, didn't simply log the discrepancy. She photographed it with high resolution. And she specifically documented it as seepage originating from the panel seam, not from any access hatch. Her official log entry directly contradicted your verbal assessment, and her documentation is what triggered the mandatory no-go flag in our maintenance tracking system. Robert finally understood with crushing clarity. The call from maintenance hadn't been to approve the flight. It had been to officially ground the aircraft. He'd been so consumed by his rage, so obsessively focused on his phone call to Richard, that he'd completely missed the second incoming call. While you were busy attempting to get a black woman terminated for doing her job correctly, Richard said, his voice a quiet razor, the maintenance supervisor was literally running up to the aircraft to inform you the plane was officially grounded. You were so busy destroying your career, you didn't even notice you were about to trigger a federal safety investigation. Robert couldn't breathe properly. You didn't just refuse to fly with your boss, Robert. You were actively, illegally, and incompetently attempting to operate an $80 million commercial aircraft with a known mandatory no-go condition. You were prepared to fly Marcus Blackwood, one of the most valuable clients in the entire world, across the country in an unsafe aircraft. You were the actual risk. You were the genuine liability, not her. Richard stood up decisively. So, by all means, Robert, contact the FAA. Please, absolutely tell them your version of events because we're sending them our complete documentation. We are providing them your termination report, your incomplete mandatory training records, your false maintenance assessment, and a formal complaint for conduct unbecoming a certificated airman and gross negligence. Ms. Carter, as the owner of this company, is personally filing an official report with the Federal Aviation Administration. Your days as a commercial pilot aren't just finished at Phoenix Elite. They're finished permanently. Period. This was the hard karma in its purest form. It wasn't simply that he was a bigot. It was that his bigotry had transformed him into a lazy, incompetent, and genuinely dangerous pilot. His arrogance, which he'd always considered his greatest strength, had been the precise thing that blinded him to his own potentially fatal mistake. The diversity hire he'd attempted to ground had actually just saved his life and everyone else's, and in doing so, she had taken his entire livelihood. Remove him from the property, Richard said to the security officers, and ensure he's permanently off premises. He is now officially considered a security threat. As Robert was physically hauled to his feet, a numb, ringing sound in his ears, he had one final devastating realization. Diana hadn't just been monitoring her crew culture. She'd been inspecting her aircraft with genuine expertise. That hydraulic seepage hadn't been a random discovery. She had been specifically looking for it. She knew about the bulletin. She knew exactly what to look for. She hadn't just been a better person. She had been in every conceivable way a superior pilot. The flight to San Francisco was by all professional measures absolutely perfect. Captain Rodriguez, the standby pilot, was a sharp, highly professional man who had greeted Diana with a simple, respectful, "Good to be flying with you, ma'am." He took the right seat without any question or hesitation. The irony was not lost on Diana whatsoever. Rodriguez was a Latino man in his early 50s. Had he been the first officer, Robert Mitchell probably would have been perfectly polite and professional, seeing him as just another guy. The venom had been reserved specifically for her, for the dual transgression of her race and her gender. They handled the entire flight with textbook precision. The reroute over the Rocky Mountains was smooth and efficient, the higher altitude keeping them comfortably above the turbulence Robert had been so arrogantly willing to power through. Diana flew the G-800 with a light, practiced, expert touch. It was, after all, her personal aircraft. She'd been one of the very first to receive type certification, a fact she'd absolutely insisted upon. "I will never sell a product I don't understand from the ground up," she'd told her board of directors firmly. When they descended into the hazy skies of the San Francisco Bay Area, Diana executed an absolutely flawless landing, touching the G-800 onto the runway so smoothly that the passengers barely felt any contact. As they deplaned, Marcus Blackwood shook her hand very firmly. "Diana, that was one of the smoothest flights of my entire life. My legal team will have the revised $960 million contract to your team by tomorrow morning." He paused, then added thoughtfully, "And what you did back there, that was the best executive decision I've ever witnessed personally. You're an exceptional leader." "I'm just a pilot who insists on maintaining a high-quality cockpit environment, Marcus," she replied, "in every possible sense of that word." The following weeks were a blur of consequences and fallout. The Millbrook incident, as it quickly became known, ripped through the private aviation community like wildfire. Robert Mitchell, exactly as predicted, was completely blackballed. His hard karma wasn't a single dramatic event, but a slow, agonizing dissolution of everything he'd built. First, the Federal Aviation Administration launched an emergency investigation based on Phoenix Elite's detailed report. They subpoenaed the airport's complete security footage, all maintenance documentation, and most critically, the cockpit voice recorder. The CVR, which Diana had authorized to be pulled and analyzed, contained every single damning word. "Diversity hire, unqualified risk, I will not fly with her." Faced with the absolutely undeniable proof of his bigotry and his gross negligence regarding the mandatory maintenance bulletin, the FAA issued an emergency complete revocation of his airline transport pilot certificate. He was grounded, not merely suspended, but permanently revoked. To ever fly commercially again, he would have to retake every single examination, every check ride from basic private pilot all the way up to ATP. A multi-year, $150,000 process that no aviation company would ever fund. He attempted to sue Phoenix Elite for wrongful termination. The case was dismissed in summary judgment within weeks. His own recorded words on the CVR were the prosecution's most powerful evidence. The judge, a no-nonsense woman, reportedly lectured his attorney for even bringing such a frivolous case to her courtroom. He lost his expensive waterfront condo. His luxury car was repossessed. His friends throughout the industry stopped returning his calls completely. The man who had flown combat jets and commanded $80 million aircraft found himself desperately applying for a dispatcher position at a small regional cargo operation in rural Kansas. He didn't get it. The hearing manager had heard the complete story. Nobody would trust his judgment anymore. Robert Mitchell, the self-proclaimed king of the skis, was now permanently, irrevocably grounded. He was a ghost in the aviation world. A cautionary tale whispered in briefing rooms from Millbrook to Singapore. He was the man who had everything and threw it all away because he couldn't tolerate seeing a black woman in the seat beside him. The shock waves of the Millbrook incident did not stop at the airport gate. They radiated outward powerfully, shaking the very foundations of Phoenix Elite aviation. For Diana Carter, the $960 million contract signature from Marcus Blackwood, delivered via courier the very next morning, was not a victory trophy to be displayed. It was a promissory note, A $960 million reminder that her company had a serious cultural cancer, and she had just been forced to perform emergency surgery on the ramp. Now, she absolutely had to ensure the disease was truly eliminated. Her first major meeting was not with her corporate lawyers or her public relations team. It was an emergency all-staff meeting in the main aircraft hangar, standing directly in front of the very G800 that Robert Mitchell had attempted to fly unsafely. The aircraft was back in service, having been given a complete inspection and full bill of health by a specialist engineering team. Diana stood on a small raised platform, no podium, just a wireless microphone. Every single employee who wasn't currently in the air was present. Pilots, flight attendants, maintenance technicians, dispatchers, administrative staff. The mood was electric with fear and rumors. "Good morning," she began, her voice echoing slightly in the massive hangar. "Most of you know me as Miss Carter. Most of you see me primarily in the boardroom and executive offices. Some of you, as you now know, have seen me in the cockpit performing line operations. I've always believed that a CEO who doesn't understand the daily work of their employees is just a glorified accountant pushing numbers. So I fly regular line operations. I see what you see. I experience what you experience." She paused deliberately, her eyes sweeping across the diverse crowd. "Last week on this aircraft, I experienced something that I absolutely will not tolerate anywhere in my company. I'm not here to relitigate every detail of what happened. The cockpit voice recorder, the complete maintenance documentation, and multiple eyewitness accounts have made the facts painfully, undeniably clear. Captain Robert Mitchell was terminated for gross misconduct, active discrimination, and a horrifying, dangerous breach of safety protocol." A murmur went through the assembled crowd. "He was not terminated for being old-fashioned," she continued, her voice hardening with intensity. "He was not terminated for a simple lapse in judgment. He was terminated because his arrogance transformed him into a dangerous pilot. He was terminated because his prejudice made him fundamentally incompetent. He chose to deliberately ignore a mandatory maintenance bulletin. He chose to bully a first officer who was in that critical moment the only person in the cockpit actually doing their job correctly. He was a genuine liability, and I do not and will not tolerate liabilities in my company whatsoever." She looked directly at the assembled pilots, noticing the sea of faces, diverse but still predominantly white and male. "This is not about sensitivity training exercises. This is about fundamental safety. Prejudice is a dangerous distraction. Arrogance is a blinder to reality. If you are looking at your copilot and seeing their skin color, their gender, or their age instead of their instruments and their professional checklists, you are not functioning as a pilot. You are simply a passenger with a good seat, and you have absolutely no place on my flight deck." She then turned to Richard, the director of flight operations, who was standing at the side looking pale and uncomfortable. "I'm certain you're all wondering about the failures in our chain of command. Richard, please step up here." Richard looked like he was walking to his own execution. He joined her slowly on the platform. "Captain Mitchell," Diana said, addressing the crowd but looking directly at Richard, felt empowered to call his direct superior and demand what he called a qualified pilot, which was clearly bigoted code language. "Richard, what was your initial response?" Richard swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he spoke into the microphone. "I attempted to find a replacement. I tried to smooth over the situation. I was wrong. I was intimidated by Captain Mitchell. He was a very senior captain, and I failed. I failed to uphold the company's standards, and I failed to protect a first officer who was being actively harassed." Diana nodded once. "Yes, you did fail. So the important question is, what happens now?" She turned to Richard directly. "Richard has been with Phoenix Elite since the very first day. He is a brilliant operations logistician, but he failed a critical leadership test, which is why for the next 9 months he is being demoted to senior flight dispatcher at a significantly reduced salary. He will be on the front lines relearning what our crews face every single day. And his replacement as interim director of flight operations will be Captain Rodriguez." A ripple of genuine surprise went through the crowd. Captain Rodriguez, the man who had flown with her to San Francisco, stepped forward confidently. He was highly respected, quiet, and known for his meticulous, by-the-book professionalism. "This is the new standard at Phoenix Elite," Diana said firmly. "Excellence, full stop. Your seniority, your accumulated hours, your background, absolutely none of it matters more than your professionalism today, right now. We will be conducting a full anonymous third-party audit of our company culture starting tomorrow morning. If you feel you cannot meet this standard, my office door is open. We will arrange a generous severance package. For everyone else, get back to work. The meeting was just the beginning of comprehensive change. The Millbrook incident had given Diana a terrible but valuable gift: absolute clarity. She saw the Robert Mitchells in her company not as individual bad apples, but as the predictable product of a systemic problem, an entire industry that had for a full century lionized the maverick pilot, the ex-military hotshot arrogant man who flew by the seat of his pants and gut instinct. Robert's gut feeling was the very thing she was trying to systematically eradicate. Modern aviation wasn't about instincts or guts. It was about systems, comprehensive checklists, and true collaborative crew resource management. His bigotry wasn't just a character flaw. It was a complete failure of crew resource management principles. She took her clarity and determination to the board of directors. In the 43rd floor boardroom, overlooking the impressive Manhattan skyline, she faced her board. They were mostly older, mostly white, and steeped in old money and traditional ways. They were extremely happy about the $960 million Blackwood contract. They were considerably less enthusiastic about her next ambitious proposal. "The audit results are genuinely illuminating," she said, as a slide appeared on the large wall screen. 74% of our female and minority flight crew members report feeling consistently undervalued or patronized by senior captains. 43% report having legitimate safety concerns overruled without proper justification, the exact thing Mitchell did to me. "Deanna," said one board member, a man named Arthur Vaughn, "this seems like a human resources issue. A few bad apples in the bunch. Mitchell is gone. Rodriguez is in charge. You've handled it effectively." "No, Arthur, I've patched it temporarily," Diana countered, her voice sharp and clear. "The fundamental problem is our pilot pipeline. We hire from the same limited pool as everyone else. We hire ex-airline, ex-military. We hire pilots who already have 18,000 hours and potentially 18,000 hours of ingrained bad habits and attitudes. We are constantly trying to retrain an established culture. I am proposing we build one from scratch intentionally." She clicked to the next slide. It read, "The Phoenix Elite Aviation Scholars Program. I am proposing a $62 million 7-year investment," she stated clearly. The room went completely silent. "We will fully fund the entire aviation education from 0 hours to a complete ATP certification for 25 exceptional candidates annually. We will partner with universities, accredited flight schools, and community programs in underserved areas nationwide. We will identify the brightest minds, the most stable personalities, the most genuinely dedicated young people who would never have been able to afford entry into a cockpit." "62 million?" Vaughn sputtered. "Deanna, this is social engineering, not business strategy." "It's the best business investment we'll ever make, Arthur," Diana said, her voice dropping to a calm, intense level. "A full ATP certification costs upwards of $175,000 currently. It's an insurmountable financial barrier to entry for most of the population. This isn't about charity whatsoever. This is about supply. This is about creating a dedicated pipeline of pilots who are trained in the Phoenix way from their very first flight hour. They won't learn checklist discipline as a mere suggestion. They'll learn it as absolute religion. They won't learn crew resource management as a corporate buzzword. They'll learn it as the fundamental basis of safe flight operations. And when they graduate, they will have an 8-year contract with us exclusively. We will have in 12 years the most professional, most dedicated, and most loyal pilot corps in the entire industry. This isn't a diversity program. It's a talent acquisition and development program on a scale nobody else is attempting." She looked at each board member directly. "Robert Mitchell cost us a potential $320 million contract, and he nearly cost us an $80 million aircraft and multiple lives. One man, one bad day, one lifetime of completely unchallenged arrogance. This program is a $62 million insurance policy to ensure that catastrophe never happens again. The Blackwood contract more than pays for it completely. This is our future." The motion was formally placed on the table. It passed unanimously. 11 months later, Robert Mitchell sat in a beige, windowless office in Omaha, Nebraska. The smell of stale coffee and industrial carpet cleaner was overwhelming and depressing. He was 61 years old now. His silver hair was now a dull, thinning gray. He had lost his waterfront condo. His wife had left him months ago, taking the last of their joint savings with her. He was desperately applying for a position as a night shift dispatcher for a small regional cargo airline. The interviewer, a man half his age, was reviewing his resume carefully. 22,000 hours, the interviewer said, whistling appreciatively. Combat jets, commercial 747s, Gulf Streams. Robert, you're incredibly overqualified for this position. Why do you want to be a night dispatcher? Just looking for a significant change of pace, Robert mumbled, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ready to stay on the ground for a while. The interviewer tapped his pen thoughtfully. Mitchell, why do I recognize that name? He typed something into his computer. His eyes widened noticeably. He clicked a link, then another. He read silently for a full 2 minutes, the silence stretching uncomfortably. Then he slowly leaned back in his chair. The expression on his face wasn't anger exactly. It was a kind of fascinated disgust. Oh my God, the interviewer breathed. You're that guy, the Millbrook guy, the diversity hire incident guy. Robert's face burned bright crimson. That was a complete misunderstanding. It was all she deliberately set me up. The interviewer held up one hand firmly. Save it, just save it. Wow, just absolutely wow. He closed Robert's folder decisively and stood up, pushing the resume back across the desk as if it were contaminated. I think this interview is definitely over, Mr. Mitchell. We're a very small operation here. We all have to trust each other completely. Can't have, a proven liability. The word hit Robert like a physical punch. He staggered out into the bleak Nebraska afternoon wind. A man with 22,000 hours of accumulated experience who was now officially unemployable anywhere in aviation. The hard karma wasn't just that he'd lost his prestigious job. It was that he had become a living ghost, a cautionary tale that would follow him to every corner of the industry he had once ruled with arrogance. At that exact same moment, Deanna Carter was standing in a completely different kind of room, a university lecture hall filled with 25 of the brightest, most excited faces she had ever seen. It was the inaugural class of the Phoenix Elite Aviation Scholars Program. They were from Detroit, from the South Bronx, from rural Appalachia, from South Los Angeles. They were valedictorians, community leaders, mathematics champions, and they were all about to learn to fly professionally. Diana was delivering the keynote address. They will tell you that you don't belong, she was saying, her voice filled with a passion that commanded absolute silence in the room. They will look at your face, your name, your background, your zip code, and they will try to put you in a predetermined box. They will call you a scholarship student. They will whisper that you are a token or a quota fulfillment. They will try to make you feel small and unworthy. They will do this because they themselves are small. She walked to the very edge of the stage. I am here to tell you with absolute certainty that you are not here because of my charity. You are here because of your demonstrated excellence. You are here because you are genuinely the best. We didn't lower any standards to find you. We searched in places nobody else was bothering to look. And now your job is straightforward. You must be better. When they complete their pre-flight in 6 minutes, you take 12. When they glance casually at the weather, you study it thoroughly. When they learn the emergency checklists, you memorize them completely. You will be so good, so professional, so absolutely flawless that their prejudice has no oxygen to breathe. It will suffocate and die in the face of your undeniable competence. You are not the diversity hires of the future. You are the standard. People like Robert Mitchell, she said, using his name publicly for the first time, believe that competence is a fixed, unchanging object, that their 22,000 hours of experience means they can stop learning and growing. That is the most dangerous belief any pilot can ever have. I promise you this. The day you think you're the absolute best, the day you think you have nothing left to learn, is the day you must hand in your wings permanently. Because that is the day you become a genuine liability. You are the new horizon, she finished powerfully. You are the future of this company and this industry. You are the Phoenix elite standard. Now who's ready to fly? The applause was absolutely deafening. 1 year later, the cockpit of November 800 Phoenix, the same G800, was bathed in the orange glow of a spectacular sunset over the Atlantic Ocean. They were en route to London, climbing smoothly through 41,000 feet. In the left captain's seat, Diana Carter sipped her coffee. In the right first officer seat, First Officer Maya Rodriguez, age 24, expertly handled communications with Shannon Oceanic Control. Shannon, Phoenix 800, requesting climb to flight level 430. Maya was the valedictorian of the first scholarship class, a brilliant young woman from Miami who spoke 4 languages fluently and held a degree in aerospace engineering. She had in one intense year consumed flight training with a ferocious, joyful intensity. Their pre-flight inspection in Millbrook had been a masterclass in professionalism. Diana had watched carefully as Maya conducted the walk around, noting how she spent extra time beneath the right wing, her flashlight meticulously checking the very hydraulic pump that had started everything. She hadn't just passed the test. She had embodied the complete lesson. "Good catch on the high-altitude winds forecast, Maya," Diana said. "Filing for 430 early saved us a confrontation with that jet stream." "Thank you, Captain," Maya said, her eyes continuously scanning the instruments. The turbulence prediction model suggested it would be rough at 410, but the temperature differential was better at 430. I figured a smoother ride for our passengers. Diana smiled genuinely. She had taught them well. "My job as captain is to be the final authority. Your job as first officer is to challenge me with solid data. The best pilot is always the one who is most thoroughly prepared." Maya had been absolutely prepared. They flew in comfortable, professional silence for a time, the deep hum of the Rolls-Royce engines the only sound filling the space. "Ma'am," Maya said finally, her voice slightly hesitant, "can I ask you something personal?" "Go ahead, Maya." We all know the complete story about Captain Mitchell. It's become legend in our class. Were you scared when it happened?" Diana watched the curve of the earth stretching endlessly before them. Black space above, orange fire below. "Scared," she said thoughtfully. "No, I was angry. Angry for every qualified pilot ever passed over, every attendant disrespected, and for how dangerous ego nearly killed us all. I wasn't scared, Maya. I was driven by purpose." She turned to her first officer. "He thought I was a risk, a diversity hire, an unqualified token, but people like us don't get free passes or easy paths. We work twice as hard to be seen as equal, which is perfectly fine." She smiled warmly. "Because when we finally get here, we're twice as good as those who doubted us." She looked at the endless horizon ahead. "You have the aircraft controls." "I have the aircraft controls, Captain," Maya said confidently. As they flew into the bright night, the future of aviation was truly in good hands. And just like that, Captain Mitchell's entire career evaporated into nothing. It wasn't just his bigotry that permanently grounded him. It was the arrogance that blinded him completely to his own dangerous incompetence. Diana Carter didn't just own the plane. She owned a standard of excellence he could never possibly meet. His gut feeling was just prejudice disguised as experience, and the risk he saw was actually the very person who caught his own potentially fatal mistake. He thought he was the king of the skis, but he was just a liability. Diana's hard work and dedication put her in the CEO's chair, and her refusal to compromise on safety or respect is what kept her there. This is a story of hard karma where the glass ceiling wasn't just broken. It was owned by the woman he tried to keep on the ground. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more.